Today, we celebrate the man, we celebrate his legacy. The focus of the second Rickert Allen Memorial Lecture is Becoming COVID-19 Resilient. I now ask you to stand as we have the national anthem of Jamaica. The invocation for today's program comes to us from the Executive Assistant for the General Manager of Finance at NCB. She has over 14 years of experience in accounting and banking. Mrs. Julia Wong Brooks brings our invocation.
Let us pray. Most gracious Heavenly Father, we thank you for life. We thank you for the opportunity to gather together in a fashion like this. We thank you for your loving kindness. And Lord, as we gather, both virtually and in person, we thank you for the opportunity to celebrate the life and contribution of Dr. Rickert Allen, a man who was very passionate about lifelong learning. At this second staging of the Dr. Rickert Allen Memorial Lecture, we ask that you allow us to understand the impact that the life of one man can have. And even as we reflect on his impact, that we too will seek to have an impact in the world that everyone will be able to speak about. Lord, we ask that you bless his family as they carry on his legacy. We ask that you continue to comfort them and help them to heal. Lord, for these two organizations, NCB and UCC, we ask that you allow them to continue to grow from strength to strength. Lord, they too have produced a great impact in Jamaica. And we just ask that as employees, as colleagues, as citizens, as leaders of these organizations, you just help us with wisdom and courage to continue to move them forward. Bless us now. We ask that you continue to protect us and watch over us and take the rest of the service in your hands. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Wong Brooks. Indeed, may both institutions continue to grow from strength to strength. We'll now have a welcome and opening remarks. The first of the welcome and opening remarks comes from the President of the University of the Commonwealth Caribbean, Professor Dennis Gale. He has held leadership roles in 6 major accredited universities across the United States, the United Kingdom, United Arab Emirates, and across the Caribbean. Professor Gale is highly regarded for his expertise in research publication, in strategic management, international business, international marketing, international economics, university governance, regional, national academic programs, as well as institutional accreditation. Over to you, Professor Gale.
Welcome to the second annual Memorial Lecture in honor of Dr. Rick Allen, with the theme of becoming COVID-19 resilient, including the perspectives of business and family. Although he did not survive to see the full impact of the coronavirus pandemic upon socioeconomic systems across the world, including Jamaica, during the past 2 years, the concept of resilience was always critical for Dr. Allen, given his assessment of the business environment and the need for organizations as well as individuals to position themselves for success. It is also most fitting that his memory is now honored not only by this annual event, but also by a scholarship enabling an aspiring and motivated student to pursue his or her dreams, because he was himself driven to model excellence by his own dreams. I first met Dr. Allen in mid-2017 when we discussed the possibility that he might consider joining the UCC Board of Directors, adding this commitment to his role as Senior General Manager of the Group Human Resources and Facilities Division of the National Commercial Bank, Jamaica Limited, among other service contributions. After an extended discussion, I was expecting him to say that he would think about my proposal. Instead, he simply shook my hand in acceptance. In the course of our subsequent board meetings, his fellow directors found that we could always count on Dr. Allen to be incisive and clear while exemplifying integrity and commitment, bringing his capabilities and his considerable resources to bear upon the applied meaning of the term effective governance. By this, he meant not only a board of directors that lives up to its due diligence commitments, but also one that actively involves itself in helping to chart a strategic vision for the evolving future of the institution at issue, and in encouraging executive excellence while respecting the difference between governance and management. By May 2019, when I relinquished the role of University of the Commonwealth Caribbean Board Chairman to take the reins as University President instead, all board members agreed that he'd be an excellent replacement. During the meetings that followed, we enjoyed his recurring comment that we are all living in volatile, uncertain, confusing, and ambiguous times. His focus upon time management and his consistent advocacy that it was essential for an organization positioning itself for success to be very agile, indeed resilient, and to take a long strategic view of the business environment, rising above the pressures and the clamor of the moment. We had our last board meeting together in the UCC boardroom on Thursday, April the 9th, 2020, and shared post-meeting refreshments as he hurried to his next meeting at NCB. We agreed to discuss follow-up matters during the weekend. When I attempted to call him, Dr. Allen did not answer his phone. I subsequently learned that he had passed away at his home in Mandeville on Saturday, April the 11th, 2020. It is fitting that we preserve his memory, competences, and character in this way, because Dr. Allen always sought to make a difference to those who crossed his path in an innovative and compelling manner, demonstrating respect and consideration for everyone. We are now continuing this annual leadership series in a way that will be sure to remind all participants of a consummate professional who loved life, his family, friends, enjoyed his acquaintances, and left an indelible memory in the minds of his interlocutors. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Professor Gale. Indeed, we are living in volatile and uncertain times. In just a few minutes, we will speak about resilience and rebounding from these uncertain times. But first, Let's hear from a man with a proven track record of human resource management and workforce analytics. He is an expert in organizational transformation and industrial relations. As the General Manager of Group Human Resource and Facilities Division, Mr. Houghton Cummins is a leader in human resource management field, with experience gained from the National Water Commission, where he served for over 11 years, and at the National Commercial Bank, where he's currently serving and has served for over 16 years. Mr. Houghton Cummins.
Professor Dennis Gale, President of the University of the Commonwealth Caribbean, UCC, Dr. Yvonne Dawkins, Associate Vice President for Academic Affairs of UCC, Taylor Lynn, NCB Foundation Chair, Sandra Grey, Assistant General Manager, Group Human Resources and Facilities Division at NCB, distinguished panelists including Dr. Taneisha Ingleton, Vice President of Administration at the Caribbean Maritime University, Dr. Christine Clarke, Senior Lecturer at the University of the West Indies, Mona, Trisha Williams-Singh, Founding Director of TWS Consultancy. Attendees, good morning. Thank you all for attending the second annual UCC NCB Dr. Rickert Allen Memorial Lecture. Becoming COVID resilient. These words have a certain buzz to them. The world has been discussing this topic since mid-2020. At that time, it was hoped that the virus would run its course in a few months. Yet 28 months later, here we are. We're still working on what it means to become COVID resilient. This pandemic has been unrelenting. Even as some parts of the world are reopened, reports are that Shanghai, the financial hub of China, is locked down due to new surges in the COVID-19 infections. The World Health Organization still classifies COVID-19 as a pandemic. And as most countries are open for the economic good, there are still many risks to consider. Will reopening societies lead to reshuttered economies? Do the projections outweigh the risk? We can all agree that COVID-19 has been devastating to families, businesses, schools, communities, and industries. And we can also agree that many of us have had to learn new operational methodologies. Even this virtual address is evidence that we are adapting to a new normal. In business, much like the pandemic, making projections and pivoting is fundamental. 2 years in, leaders have had to evolve beyond pivoting to embracing change. Changing the ways we plan and operate, the ways we work and where we work, and changing the ways we do business. With infection rates falling in many territories worldwide, many wonder if we are moving from pandemic to epidemic. McKinsey in the article, Pandemic to Endemic, How the World Can Learn to Live with COVID-19, published in October 2021, stated that for the most part, endemic diseases are here to stay. The shift from pandemic to endemic entails a number of practical considerations, but the shift is also psychological, as we will be deprived of the satisfaction that a clean pandemic endpoint would bring. Instead, societies will have to adapt to living alongside COVID-19 by making some deliberate choices about how to coexist. What does that mean for us in Jamaica? How do we shift our psychological view from the high alert associated with COVID-19 to the virus being a part of our everyday lives for years to come? Have you seen evidence of COVID fatigue setting in? Importantly, can we shift our mindset at this time? McKinsey put forward defining the new normal as the first step among 4 comprehensive management approach considerations. I believe that defining what is normal is crucial to this memorial lecture's theme of becoming COVID-19 resilient. The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development presented a guide on how we can find this new normal between COVID-19 and well-being. Life in the pandemic. It said a well-being approach can help leaders to refocus, putting people and planet first. A well-being approach can also help inform stronger strategic alignment between the public and private sector in building back better. The involvement of businesses is important. First, because of the direct role they play in improving employee well-being. And second, because of the way their products and services affect societal well-being outcomes. A shared outcome-based framework can help counteract the idea that the public and private sectors have opposing interests and can help further align their efforts in working towards societal well-being priorities. To become COVID-19 resilient, we need to replicate this philosophy of shared outcomes in all we do, especially in business and education. Dr. Rickert Allen guided the NCB financial group to pivot and change, even before they became buzzwords. As leaders in the home, schools, businesses, industries, and this country, we agree that our responsibility is to guide our charges through any uncertain time. Here are 4 steps to how we become resilient, even beyond COVID-19. First, always be prepared for change. The pandemic knocked us all for 6. Jamaica experienced 20 consecutive quarters of steady economic growth, which screeched to a halt in March 2020. And just as we are seeing the light of the COVID-19 tunnel, turmoil erupts in Eastern Europe. The past 2 years have especially taught us that forward-looking strategies ease the impacts of external shocks. For instance, years before COVID, Dr. Allen established procedures for the bank and its employees to be effective outside of the office. He could not foretell the future, but he saw flexibility in the workplace as an asset and not a disadvantage. The infrastructure investment was huge, but our group had the easiest transition across the industry. Preparation for our on-location staff was also swiftly implemented. What change and forward-looking planning look like will differ across industries and peoples. However, in scoping for risk, leaders should also seek avenues to start change for the long-term good. 2, mindset shifts are necessary to see the opportunities in the challenge. We have already said that the mind is a powerful tool. This is true in sport, business, and life. The pandemic has been challenging for some, but many others see the time as a way to build out ideas, start business, and thrive. Many develop resilience to obvious ripples because they decide to ride the waves and not be swept under them. As Henry Ford said, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. Choose to see the opportunities. 3, examine the collective good of our decisions. It is easy to focus only on ourselves or corporation advantages, but a well-functioning society needs to pull in one direction. Vaccination is a greater good concept, whether it is for polio, tuberculosis, HPV, or COVID-19. Employee and student well-being are also for the collective good. For those who knew him, we can remember that Dr. Allen was passionate about human resources. He saw employee transformation as crucial to their personal benefit, and that was shared throughout for the financial group's well-being. Shared outcomes are powerful catalysts. Our new normal as a society should not only be about emerging technology and virtual conferences. It is how we can propel towards universal well-being. All our decisions have ripple effects. Take this lecture, for instance. NCB Financial Group made a decision a year after Dr. Allen's passing to solidify his visionary legacy of transformation with the UCC. Our collaboration has so far brought to fruition a scholarship to a student. Later today, 23-year-old Westmoreland native, Nadian White, will have the opportunity to express how that decision has changed her life and well-being. In hindsight, The inaugural staging of the memorial lecture placed Ms. White's career and well-being into sharp focus. What are the real effects of that? That one decision to honor the life and work of Dr. Allen had a direct impact on her professional career aspiration as a network and computer system administrator. We have been able to unlock her dreams. Her chosen career offers boundless prospects for herself and our country. And as a financial group, steadfast in its own digital transformation, we know the need for professionals ready to enter this digital skilled workforce. I hope this address sparks recognition that steps to becoming COVID-19 resilient are not just immediate fixes, they are a blueprint for life.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Cummins. Indeed, some wise words there. Despite the challenges, let us find the opportunities that are available. And now we enter the exciting and interactive panel section that we spoke about earlier. This section is dubbed Rebounding from COVID-19, Perspective of Business and Family. Our moderator for this section is Assistant General Manager, Group Human Resource and Facilities Division of NCB, Ms. Sandra Grey. Ms. Grey is a Fulbrighter with extensive experience in human resource development, having over 20 years in the financial services industry. She has a proven track record in delivering in such core areas as learning and organizational development, talent management, employee relations. She has also been instrumental in the creation and implementation of several key policies designed to shape the landscape of the NCB group. Here to pilot us through the interactive panel, Ms. Sandra Grey. Over to you, Lady Grey.
Thank you very much, Gary, for the introduction, and good morning, everyone. I'm grateful that you could join us for what promises to be an exciting discussion. We have 3 panel members. Of course, I'm not yet seeing one of them, but I'm going to go ahead and introduce them just the same. Our keynote speaker, Dr. Christine Clarke. She lectures in economics at the University of the West Indies, Mona, where she's the current chair of the graduate committee with responsibility for all postgraduate degrees in the Department of Economics. She is a director of the board of the Bank of Jamaica and uses her audit certification as the chair of the audit committee. In addition, she is an independent director of the only listed used car dealer, Jetcon Corporation. Dr. Clarke has worked at the Planning Institute of Jamaica as the Director of Economic Planning. She has undertaken extensive research in the areas of public finance, economic development, economics of sports, and resilience. She has published articles on wage determination in Jamaica and on development issues in the Caribbean. She's the author of 2 books on Jamaica's relationship with the International Monetary Fund and several book chapters. She holds a PhD in economics, public finance from Rice University in Houston, Texas, and a Bachelor of Arts in economics and math from Mount Holyoke College. Our other panel member, Dr. Taneisha Ingleton, was appointed Vice President for Administration and Registrar of the Caribbean Maritime University in July 2021. She has worked as an individual consultant and a designer of the whole of government competency framework and professional pathways for the public service. She holds a Bachelor of Laws from the University of London with upper second class honors, a PhD from the University of Saskatchewan in Canada, a Master's of Philosophy with distinction, a postgraduate diploma in education with distinction, and a Bachelor of Arts with first class honors from the University of the West Indies. Dr. Ingleton successfully completed the public sector senior leadership development program offered in collaboration with the Management Institute of National Development, MIND, the Office of the Services Commission, and the Ministry of Public Service. She was named valedictorian by her cohort. And our other panel member, who we eagerly await her arrival, Trisha Williams-Singh. She is the chairman of the Early Childhood Commission and director of the One Jamaica Foundation. After a successful career at Air Jamaica as customer service manager at Norman Manley Airport, she joined Digicel, where she was promoted to senior manager corporate relations while serving also as a director of the Digicel Foundation. Mrs. Williams-Singh is the founding director of TWS Consulting, where she leads the consultancy in brand awareness, public relations, strategy building, and events management. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Profile of our panel members promises to be very interesting a discussion. So we're going to segue off with Dr. Christine Clarke first, who will share her brief thoughts on this topic, COVID-19, the perspectives of business and family. So Dr. Clarke, I yield the floor to you.
Dr. Winston Adams, founder and group executive chairman of the UCC group. Dr. Donald Rooms, chairman, UCC board. Professor Dennis Gale, president of the UCC. Members of the board of UCC, its faculty, administration, the entire group of companies, and of course, the students of UCC. Honorable Mr. Patrick Hilton, president and group CEO of the National Commercial Bank. Mr. Houghton Cummings, General Manager, Group Human Resources and Facilities Division at NCB. Mrs. Taylor Lynn, Chair of the NCB Foundation. My co-panelists and other panelists and section leaders for today's, the second annual Rickert Allen Memorial Lecture. Good morning, thank you for having me. And I certainly hope that along with the distinguished guests, colleagues, and the wider viewing audience, that we will all have an enriching and productive discussion. I am getting a message to turn on the video, but I'm not being allowed to. My apologies. Thank you for your kind consideration in inviting me to be your keynote speaker for this distinguished lecture series, named in honor of one of our mutual colleagues, actually, Dr. Rickert Allen. I had the pleasure of meeting and interacting with Dr. Allen when I was in charge of the undergraduate degrees in the Department of Economics at Mona, attempting to get his expertise in banking and finance education to inform us as we try to review a program that we believed was very beneficial, both to students, the university, as well as the wider Jamaica. Dr. Allen certainly added significant insight and value to the process, and we are certainly sure, as has been indicated thus far, that he was a gem in every area that he engaged with, both at NCB as well as at UCC. The COVID-19 health, economic, financial, individual, household, business, and government crisis has bequeathed us a raft of considerations, challenges, and opportunities that can serve to help us to change the mindset of our nation, Jamaica. This has been in several facets indicated as a prerequisite to what we all want as Jamaicans, widespread prosperity, and that prosperity is defined broadly. I start by sharing with you a story that has been cataloged by Michael Fairbanks in his article titled, Changing the Mind of a Nation, Elements for a Process for Creating Prosperity, in a book which itself was titled Culture Matters, How Values Shape Human Progress. The book contained a series of articles and includes pieces by renowned authors such as Jeffrey Sachs, Orlando Patterson, and Michael Porter on issues relating to the transformation of societies through cultural change and other dimensions of social transformation. Fairbanks, in his article, takes us on his journey through the maze he himself was taken through as a consultant engaged by the government and private sector of Colombia. Both of these parties wanted to identify the reason why their handbags were not being well received in the top retail outlets in the major capitals of the United States and the United Kingdom. Fairbanks and his colleagues engaged on what I think is quite an intriguing journey. Of course, they naturally began their journey at the retail end of the market, as many of us as consultants or researchers would, to find out what are consumers saying about these products that they had been receiving from the Colombian handbag makers. The report was, for the price that the producers wished to receive, the quality of the bags were too low. So of course, as consultants, you move to the next step, onto the manufacturers. So the team departed to Colombia. Can anyone guess what the manufacturer said? Do you think the manufacturer said, yes, clearly there's something wrong with what we are doing and we need to fix it so that our handbags can be internationally competitive? No. The manufacturer said, no es nuestra culpa, meaning it's not our fault. We simply get the hides that the tannery send, and our job is just to make the handbags. So the consultants led by Dr. Fairbanks went down to the tanneries to find out why, what is happening, why are they sending the manufacturers bad hides to transform into handbags? And I'm sure you may be able to guess what the tannery said. Tannery said, not our fault. It's the slaughterhouse's fault. They get more money for selling the meat for food than we pay them for the hides. So they are the ones that are not taking enough time to remove the meat without damaging the hide. And all we can do is simply work with what we get. So on they went to find the slaughterhouses to see what really was the problem. Why couldn't they provide hides that were of the quality that they ought to have been? The cowhands flatly objected to the suggestion that the quality of the hide could ever be traced to them. They sent Fairbanks and his team to find the ranchers who were overbranding the cows according to the slaughterhouse owners, and thereby in overbranding, they're ruining the hides. So off they went to confront the ranchers. I mean, don't they understand that this could be a global brand on a production line, disrupting the plans of the government to bring in, foreign exchange? Can't they find a better way to, brand or keep track of their animals, a receipt book, some tags, something? Surely they could be reasoned with to apply some technology. They may want to engage some universities to try and see how can we deal with whatever the problem is that's causing this overbranding so that we can make the product more competitive and certainly be able to compete internationally. But again, Fairbanks and his team were met with some unexpected news. The ranchers did not accept that they had any role in the problem. Who or what do you think they laid at the root of the problem? You guessed it, the cows. The cows were stupid. The cows were plagued by insects, and so they kept rubbing their hides on the barbed wire to keep the insects off. And that is why Colombian handbags could never, ever make it into international markets. Because as Fairbanks recalls, their cows are dumb. So thousands of miles away from Bogota, certainly away from New York, where this consultancy would have started, this is what Fairbanks and his team were confronted with. Now, can you imagine going back to the president to tell him that, well, your cows are dumb, so you can't compete? And I'm sure many of the persons listening to me would say, you know, I've heard something similar in my own business or my own organization. Persons come back with results that indicate basically we can't change. Things have to remain the way they are because whatever it is, whether it is the X system or the Y process or the Z system, that's just how it is. And we just have to work with it. We've heard various variations of that right throughout, I think, almost all of our entire lives. And I'm sure Fairbanks had thought, you know, this was probably a relatively simple issue. It's just a production process. We just need to find where the quality control dipped, address it, and this was a straightforward consultancy. Maybe they would have just needed some focus groups, get the groups together to work. Maybe it's a co-op kind of solution. But of course, none of those solutions will work if the problem is premised on the IQ of the cows. Right now, we may also be hearing that in our respective vocations, avocations, everywhere we operate, the problem is impossible. Until, of course, we find somebody like ourselves who are active there, or even our dearly departed colleague, Sir Alan. Fairbanks shared this article with us when I was at the Planning Institute of Jamaica, and we were trying to integrate 31 separate sectoral plans into one integrated national plan. Many of you may have heard of this. This is Vision 2030 Jamaica. Can anyone see the difficulties that we were faced with then going after what my B school colleagues at UCC would characterize as a BHAG? We want to make Jamaica the place of choice, not I'm here because I can't leave, not I'm here because, okay, maybe I'm a bit too old to go to where I maybe would prefer, but the place of choice to live, work, raise families, and do business. Can you see the problem that we would have been facing? Many persons view whatever challenges they're going through in Jamaica as the cause of something that is just perhaps unchangeable. As we are trying to scope out our recovery from COVID, we also are confronted by charting our path through the latest apparent crisis in the form of the Russia-Ukraine crisis. And we are on a continuing path to figure out how we will address the deep and broad risks associated with the imminent impact of climate change. This is an important season during which we will have to identify where we have been going wrong. What are the opportunities for change, and how we will have to ensure that the lessons we learned from coping with COVID, because as has been indicated, we're simply moving from pandemic to endemic. No one is any longer thinking about eradication. We are indeed forced to look back at these lessons, to keep those lessons front and center, to translate them into structural improvements in order to ensure what we all wish for, regardless of where we are, improved quality of life. But all of this, as per my example from Fairbanks and all the examples that are popping in all of your heads right now, persons who may have had this view, this is totally premised on the quality and resilience of our human capital. And so it's very fitting that this session is almost populated by persons in the human resource and other areas of managing, because I'm going to speak very deeply about the need and the increased need in the wake of COVID for improved people, talent, managers. The questions we ask are also going to be very important, and certainly the perspectives we take to trying to address these questions are going to also be central. Certainly our culture, our approach, and even our agenda. Persons say they want to be objective, but we all have an agenda somewhere, unspoken, unwritten, can be to our advantage or our disadvantage. In many ways, COVID-19 forced Jamaica to stop doing many things by brute force. What do I mean? We were forced to introspect and quickly respond to our ways of doing, our culture that had influenced the decades that have passed in how we operate. Why were we doing certain things? Why were we doing them the way we were doing them? What purpose did all of the routines that we used to do in the way we used to do it, what purpose did they in the end serve? Were they just, I don't know, maybe a reflection of some ego or some presenteeism that we felt needed to be done to say we were being productive? Why did we have functionalities in our teaching and learning or our banking system or human resource management platforms or payroll systems or taxpayer systems, any system you can think of that you interact with? Why did we have them and never use them for the decades? But suddenly on March 10, when we had to think about how we were going to continue to deliver value to our relative shareholders, stakeholders, clients, employees, and all the groups that depend on all of our activities, why were we able, in many cases, to simply flick a switch, train whoever needed to be trained, and our operations were able to continue? We were operating using brute force, where we could have long ago used many functionalities that we had. And this is on the individual side, the business side, and certainly government. Are all of the things we really require persons to do, require our staff to do, our customers to do, were they really necessary, and did they have to be done that way? In other words, were we the cause of our own vulnerabilities during the COVID-19 period? Did we already have the tools, but we were just, we don't want to operationalize this section. Let's just do the, the bare minimum, and later we'll add other functionalities. And did we do that whilst ignoring the need, as we know in business, for redundancies, for risk provisioning in all the various aspects? COVID-19 is one of what perhaps the business world will classify ultimately as a classic kind of disruptive black swan event. How we rebound, how we recover is going to depend on how we look at our old ways of doing things. Following on the questions I had asked before, why? Did we have to do it this way? Did they add value? What were customers really saying? And how do they view us now that we've, at the flick of a switch, we have now responded to many of the things that they would have been complaining before? Students saying that, our various stakeholders with whom we interact. Why were we doing it that way then? What was it? And can we ensure that we no longer appeal to whatever it is that was motivating us before, but leapfrog, a leap ahead, and try to always be ahead of what our stakeholders and clients would like to see? Why weren't systems always talking to each other? What has happened that has transformed them suddenly that they're now able to communicate and give information and support our staff in the back office that would have struggled maybe through many hours trying to manually do a lot of things and piece a lot of data sets together? What costs did we impose on them, or what additional benefits could we have been getting all along? Why didn't all the persons who now have access did not have access before? Why weren't they involved all along if it is a process that requires interaction? Were we using what we had to deliver what we promised in whichever aspect? Government, I'm sure, is also continuing to ask that question. What were we leaving on the table? Some organizations even went back to the fundamentals, stripped down the building and went back to the studs. Why did we exist? And use the opportunity to rebrand and re-engage the marketplace. One of the critical areas in which our economic life has been changed is, of course, in the way we do business with each other as individuals, with businesses, with other businesses, and to a limited extent, with the government. We have been forced to become digital natives, whether we wanted to or not, whether we wanted to bank online or we wanted to put grades online or see our, human resource history online. We have now been forced to become digital natives. Some banks, imagine that, no longer accepting cash in branch. Who would have ever thought that day could ever come when a bank is no longer accepting cash in hand? Remittances no longer coming through the airports in the volume that clearly they were pre-COVID, because we had a almost 30–40% increase in the first 6 months of remittances. And that's largely probably due to the fact that travel was no longer permitted, but the flows still had to come. Then there have been expanded use, and I'm sure the NCB group as well as UCC can attest to the expanded use of third-party solutions to advance increased convenience for customers. How we work clearly has also changed. Workers are now empowered to work independently. And so now management and supervisory staff will now have to, demonstrate how being together, the teamwork, the resilience building, the brainstorming, and also the utilization of what comes out of those brainstorming and teamwork activities. How is this going to be used? Do you really have a use for this, or are we just doing this to tick off for, presidents or college presidents to say, yes, we did 2 team building exercises and there are some Gantt charts that came up, but how will the operations across the board change as a result of what we have done? Supervisors and managers will have, as I said before, to play a transformed role. They can no longer get away with being figureheads or simply, okay, these are the 10 rules, did you follow them? If not, you move to, disciplinary actions of whatever sort. No, you have to be motivators. You have to think beyond the immediate task and the ticking of the boxes. Flexibility in the treatment of the workday and a variety of schedules. I'm sure HR managers now are just, trying to, get an idea of who is where, who is in the building at any point in time, or who are on the roads. Are we integrating GIS into our operations so we can see and we can understand where workers are? People managers, talent managers, work process simplifiers and enhancers. These, I'm sure, our human resource managers are looking for, and I don't know how they will identify them right at this point, but I'm sure, as indicated, there is a literature on this called management as technology. So your managers are not simply there as, an indication of the incentive and the motivation to, acquire, whether it's education or experience, but they are the main component of how the business is going to function in the context of strategy, in the context of the environment that you're in, and the broader goals of the organization. Consumers certainly have transformed. They are more savvy. They're going after what they want. They are changing if they're not getting the value that they wish. They will support small businesses, but you're only as good as your last sale. You're only as good as your last student. You're only as good as the last one that comes out in terms of how you add value. They've raised their expectations. And getting value for money is now paramount, especially as I indicated in the context of now you have these inflationary pressures and other pressures and stressors coming into the environment from the external shocks. And to some extent, they're into enjoying the here and now while planning for more COVID-19s in whatever form they present themselves. We also, as a result of COVID, have to balance, the positive changes and the advances with some of the negatives that we've seen. And managing these are going to be important if we still try to look at making Jamaica, as I indicated, the place of choice. We have seen in particular the stresses. Yes, we have been working from home. We have been working maybe smartly instead of just work harder, go harder. But those stresses have, in some instances, mushroomed. They have created pressures due to uncertainty, just a general risk in the environment and the society. Some persons have lost earnings and have not been able to either access savings, which maybe they did not have, or any investment buffers. And because of the learn from home environment, we've also perhaps seen the beginning of what may have been increased opportunities for gang recruitment. We certainly see where there are reports of expansions in the lot of scamming aspect of our society into the schools. And so, and I'm sure perhaps some employers can say it is coming into my workplace also. We see as a result of all of this and just a combination of persons redesigning themselves, reorganizing their households, especially in the light of increased burdens of caregiving, increased number of violent attacks. And this certainly is going to be one of the things that is going to militate against our ability to say Jamaica is really a place of choice. It can be quite frightening to listen to some of the accounts that we've been hearing in the media. So whilst we are happy to resume and return to normal, there are new challenges that present themselves simultaneous with these new opportunities, because now schools have to contend with, oh, you know, the business sector and government want additional skills, but then there are all these soft issues that are bringing themselves to the fore and reducing the time for face-to-face actual learning, even though students are present physically. So what do the experts in disruption and disruptive technology say about this whole thing? Well, certainly on the business side, for in particular, it is not something you can always buy out your competitor, right? You cannot always buy them out because there's so many persons now, so many opportunities now for innovation. There's so many potential competitors. You won't ever be able to buy them out, especially if they can produce your product for a fraction of your whole budget. Then you really find that you're fighting a losing battle. Of course, in some industries, such as, for example, NCB's industries, the entry is restricted, but certainly I know that there would be pressures coming in and feeding through shareholders, board members, who are always on the hunt to try and identify ways in which your entity is going, come up with ideas, new approaches. Are you really doing X, or are you really logistics or some other formation that may be more effective and efficient? And on the other hand, playing it safe is also maybe not a good idea. Trying to just only be conservative without thinking about all of these different ways, reimagining the whole system and the whole structure. It probably also is not going to work out, not only for businesses, but also for a well-respected employee. Because the competition, you never know it until it actually emerges in the marketplace, right? And it can actually leapfrog almost all of any incremental kind of benign changes we might be making. And so COVID-19 is one of those things that's saying, of course, you have to be conservative in some areas, because as we would have seen, even though there have been increased use of digital technology, cash still remains key. And so we can see, even from just an operational perspective, conservatism is going to be important, but that is not going to be sufficient for us to rebound from COVID. We have to think about it, and as I'm sure on the people management side, help persons to see the need to provide for themselves also as far as possible in relation to the risks of, you know, organizational restructures that may or may not include them. As we navigate through the season, what are citizens looking for? Certainly, persons in some respects would have gained an appreciation, I think, for rest, reflection, recreation, relaxation. We have significant issues in the way how we have planned communities. And so transformation in that regard, in the context of our living situations, is perhaps a business, an area where businesses can look into. I'm not sure how, but I'm sure there are very smart minds that can think about how would we generate profitable or usable green spaces that are also sustainable and can help in our long-term fight against the potential impacts of climate change. We are more into what academics have, and even the UN group have identified as the aging Caribbean. The Caribbean has long been an aging region, and certainly we're seeing increased demand for in-home, and I put that in quotes, not necessarily in the home you grew up in or live in, but some kind of in-home forms of care. We see and have heard lots of discussions about mental health, mental unwellness, the physical and emotional unwellness that has come with being sheltering in place, people just being in the one space, and that has exacerbated these issues in the population. So there is urgent need from a policy perspective, that's the government's role, as well as for options and opportunities for persons to access this while still trying to remain part of the economic and social fabric. There will be continued pressure for digital transformation of all of government. Very little of our government interactions in Jamaica can be done in full online, very few. Maybe you may argue some of the ones that you really want to stay away from, so the paying your taxes and the filing, but there are too many other things that can't be done, that have to be done in person. And of course, we saw we're in the context of COVID with the public sector mandate to work from home. Obviously, we saw the fallout in relation to just long lines, and people are just frustrated and fed up. And we know that that can lead to potential corruption and other forms of activity that are just a waste of resources as far as an economic perspective is. But there are many things that can truly make life easier, can reduce the societal cost of compliance, just the individual, your time off from work, your lost productivity, plus just the government service. So for example, there are many things you have to apply for at some government entity that doesn't bring the government $1 of revenue. There has to be a better way to generate whatever information is needed. Think about your NIS number, your TRN number. None of these generate additional revenue at the point of them giving you the number. And so a lot of these societal costs of joining a line of persons with mixed needs and varying purposes for being there just to do something that is routine and mandatory, it seems a waste of resources. Access to services. We saw a UNDP study last year that indicated that even the PATH beneficiaries had no idea how to benefit from the care program. So clearly, even just persons understanding and being plugged into what government is doing is not very effective, even for those who are already government beneficiaries of some government service. In doing this, we will be able, and I'm sure UCC and NCB and all the private sector would be happy for this, we'd be able to open up data for use in analytics, for use in identifying business opportunities. Individuals would know, okay, this is where maybe I need to study, because clearly there's a move towards doing, different things. We're now thinking about NIDS. The central bank has announced the imminence of JAMDEX or central bank issued digital currency. There is a lot of information that could be leveraged if we were able to access the data that would fall out of this digital transformation. But they're hindered. Could it be because of the way, again, we've been doing things this way? This is how we don't collect the data, or we don't share the data, or we don't understand how to share it, so we don't share it. But then that holds us back in identifying the opportunities that are out there. Of course, everybody wants to know, these changes we've seen, are they going to be short-lived, or will they be sustained? Are they even sustainable? And again, it depends, because as has been said, in certain industries, I'm not sure that the clock can actually be turned back. We see, for example, in the financial industry, a lot of the moves forward, I'm not sure how easily we can backpedal on them. We know, though, that we have a heavily informal sector in our economy. And so how easily we make the transformation to digital, how easily we make it for persons in the informal sector to just participate is going to determine the extent to which these things permeate the society. So it may just be the same old persons, participating, for example, in NIDS, engaging with JAMDEX, or if we make it so that it is easy to comply, to participate, and to benefit from, then we may see that the transformation is actually sustainable. And of course, there are going to be areas, as I mentioned, in relation to the aging and even in the digital transformation that require policy, legislative changes, and certain critical digital projects that will need to be done. Like Jamaica, I'm sure I can't, like Colombia, apologies, I'm sure I can say that Jamaica has had its fair share of reports, from national to local government, all kinds of consultancy reports on how we should do things better. How can we move? When will we develop the culture, however, to implement these interventions? And this is where I think the private sector, the university community can play a role. Implementation of the interventions is what is going to get us there, not just the report, not just the analysis and the focus groups and the discussions, and as good as those are, and even the academic papers, how do we translate what we know into what we need to do? Can we just, as a routine, in our routine operations, make the processes we have in our offices, in our departments, in our units, in our faculties, in our systems, can we just, as a routine, make them simpler? Can we, as a routine, streamline them? Can you work with other departments and say, hey, the customers that come to both of us are pretty similar. What can we do to make it easier for them? If it's legally, of course, possible. How can you make it easier for students to add another major or change or decide, yes, after doing a year, I want to be part of the group that's doing a dissertation, let us say. Can we do it? Can we do it as a routine, not as a, okay, it's 5 years, we're reviewing our curriculum, maybe we should, and then we go and consult and it comes back again as another report. Can we make what we're doing more logical from the point of view of the client, the customer, the student, the government entity, as well as for our own employees, for their own health, for their own benefit, and for their own employee engagement and loyalty to the institution that we run? In order to increase resilience, businesses and families and the government will have to be in a constant state of reprioritization, planning for uncertainty, identification and management of risk, as well as flexibility and the capacity to work and or learn in any format. In 13 years' time from today, it has been 13 years since our Integrated National Development Plan, Vision 2030, has been launched. Where will Jamaica be in the journey towards making itself the place of choice in the next 13 years? Will there be a continuation of, oh, it's Jamaica way, we're on Jamaica time? Will it be the same old private sector? Yeah, a few entities moving ahead, but generally not much dynamism or not much more than we had 13 years ago. Is it going to be the same old public sector approach? And these questions, of course, trickle down to the rest of the society. Are we as individuals going to be doing the same thing just 13 years repeated? Will we be in the same position as the entire Colombian leather to handbag value chain that has relegated control over the process and their own fortunes ruined because the cows are stupid? What will be our cow in 13 years? Or will we have advanced our own welfare and that of the human race by making the fundamental changes, balancing the coping mechanisms of those who will be unable to keep up with the pace and timing of changes and truly live up to our fullest potential? I wish you all the very best for the remainder of today, and indeed as you continue on your individual and collective journeys throughout 2022. Continue to keep safe, reflect on the why and the how of all your processes, and allow those reflections to impact all you do. Resilience building certainly is not an event. We thought COVID was going to be, this kind of all-encompassing crisis, and here we are in another set of crises. And this is what life tends to be when you're in a small island developing state. Resilience building is not an event, it is a process, but it's not just a process that has a beginning and an end like a project. It's not time bound, because as we see, different things can happen to change your trajectory. And so resilience will have to adjust to the pressure that is being applied. And therefore it requires flexibility, it requires broad-based understanding, and more importantly, I want to underscore, it requires a commitment to people and the development as best as possible of strong 360-degree support. All the very best to the UCC and NCB, and certainly to this UCC-NCB collaboration centered around our joint colleague for the many years to come, that we will look forward to more thoughts in relation to issues affecting both groups. Thank you very much again for having me, and I hope we will have as much discussion as our time and our chair will allow.
Christine, wow, you certainly dropped a lot on us right there, a lot. It's a lot for us to unpack. So members of the audience, there will be a Q&A section, so please begin to type your questions in the chat so that our colleague Romero can field them at the appropriate time. You left some nuggets with us, Christine. I found myself writing and writing, but there were a few that really stood out for me. I just want to go over them, and then I'm going to invite the other members of the panel to comment as well. Mindset, it's very important when we're handling change and the way we do things. Ownership. Even in my own company, we're looking at, promulgating the philosophy of the owner's mindset. It's very important. We can't view change and challenges as being unchangeable. We have to look at the lessons learned and how we can make the structural changes to incorporate them. At the leadership level, we have to now, in this new paradigm, become more of motivators, be flexible, look to simplify work processes and balance the positive and the negative changes that this pandemic has unearthed, and most importantly, it's a small nugget, but it's very important, simplifying and streamlining our activities to make it easier for all our stakeholders. Very important. I want to thank you for that, and we're going to unpack it now. So perhaps I'll start with you. You alluded to it in your conversation, but just to summarize it succinctly for our audience, what are some of the ways you have seen that our economic life adjusted to the crisis?
So as I'd indicated, the first one that I think has, maybe leapfrog for us in terms of is the digital natives. Those who, apart from, and we can understand why some of our elderly and otherwise vulnerable persons, most persons I think have, wrapped their mind around using the digital space and engaging. I know that there have been, areas in which the digital divide has certainly widened, and it's one of those kind of conundrums. How do we close that without any negative disincentives towards closing those, but empowering people to engage in the space? And I still think that in some way, yes, the government has a role to play, but businesses also, again, and that goes back to the processes. How do you sign into these things? How many passwords do you need? How many security questions you're gonna ask? And if each business does this, then you can imagine persons are not maybe as trusting. In one case, we know, I think the last study I read, if there are 10 Jamaicans in a room, 8 out of 10 don't trust each other. We're a low trust society. And so we have to understand the context we're in. Yes, it's good to get, external consultants who have international experience, but without understanding the local context, you may find a heavy expenditure in an item that persons just don't trust for one reason or the other. So it's kind of, in a way, very interlinked. It's not possible to kind of fix this silo here and think it's going to benefit. No.
Yeah,
and this is where the rethinking and re-engagement comes in. So at the individual, I think we're all on a path where we know we have to be more comfortable with the digital space. We have to check for it, or over 60s who have the computer, they're checking their bank accounts to make sure no money not, whittling away, it's not dormant. Persons are engaging, persons are doing work. The teachers' colleges are doing teaching practicum online. So persons, entities are picking up with the need for us to continue living, but just in a different way.
Okay.
On the government side, well, I think we would have seen a lot more efforts, just broadly speaking, in government, also to engage the population in attempts to be transparent, but also to reduce the extent to which the uncertainty appears to be uncontrollable.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So you saw, for example, in the first year of COVID, there was a plethora of town halls on the TVs. Everything kind of came to a standstill to hear, where were we today with COVID? What was happening? What is the government doing? So at least, those of us who still staying home, we felt connected that there's something happening. We're not just on an island, at our home. And also we're keeping abreast of what is happening. I think in also the return, persons, I think, generally speaking, are taking some amount of responsibility. Thank God we don't have a situation where, you can't say to somebody, your mask, pull up your mask, and, they'll respond and move on. And there is some amount of engagement as far as that is concerned. As I said, there are other parts of economic life that have, I think, been challenged. The MSc area, I know, would have gone through maybe a couple rounds of, reassessing what they are, who they are, why they exist, what is the value they're bringing to the consumer. Because again, if you weren't online, if you didn't have delivery, and we saw the government even scramble to try to support our small businesses who do food delivery, who do food production, to see how can we give one platform. So yes, you need a password, but not for every pan chicken man that you buy from across around. You don't need that, or a different e-commerce platform with, it's configured differently, and it can be confusing.
All right. Thank you.
Sure.
So Taneisha, just to change gears, from the perspective of the family, how do you, through your lens, how have families been affected by COVID?
Thank you so much, Dr. Gray, and thank you to Dr. Clarke. That was really good, and I sat here listening and really gleaned a lot from your presentation as well. So, and I just wanted to take this opportunity to say hi to everyone on the platform as well, Ms. Sandra Grey. So indeed, the COVID-19 pandemic has impacted us all, in many different ways, and the family is no exception. We know how important the family is to our daily lives, and I think that with the COVID-19 pandemic, we saw that more than ever before. I would say that the situation created an unexpected reset. It allowed families to simplify in a lot of different ways. For example, we found that we work so hard, we have routines, and as parents, we get out of the house at a particular hour of the morning, and even if we're running our own businesses, we have particular schedules that we adhere to, and we pick up our children from school or they come home via the bus, and we are so stuck in our routine that we miss critical pieces and important information and the whole developmental needs of the child, and our own needs sometimes are not necessarily validated because of how consumed we were in our work. But the COVID-19 pandemic found a way, in a positive sense, to kind of shift all of that. And so we find that we were spending more time together as families. We were having family dinners. I don't know how many of you recognize that you were eating at the table more regularly, because we were marooned in our homes and we didn't have a choice, right? We started to do family walks, because we now had the time, the opportunity to leave out of the house together, walk in the community. We had to what should I say, revive old games, you know, that we would play at school to pass the time, because we're not used to being inside the home for such long periods. And so in my own home, I found that I taught my child things that I didn't think I needed to, such as snakes and ladders, you know, Ludo, you know, because before that, the whole focus was on the internet and utilizing those YouTube and all of those TikTok and all those other platforms. And so all of the things that we grew up with in terms of Chinese skip, you know, the games that we used to play, Stocky, and you know, all of those things. I don't know if you remember those things came back, right? Because we were at home not knowing what to do with our time. And so we found that the children now have a greater appreciation, you know, for where we are coming from as parents. And we also got an opportunity to understand them a little bit better. We started to see them in a real sense, you know, because for those of us who take our children to school in a car, we have them in the car, but we're not focused on them. We're focused on, okay, the next meeting, the phone call that we have to respond to, the email that we didn't get to, right? And for those of us whose children take the bus, we are so consumed with getting them to the bus stop and ensuring that they get on, and then we leave them for the entire day until they come in, we feed them, and we move on again. But we got that opportunity to bond. And I think that in many cases, the family relationship has been enhanced in Jamaica. But there's that positive side. But then we had another side, Dr. Christina, that I'm sure you would agree with me about, in terms of given that we were now in the space, marooned, as I said before, in the home, and we had nowhere to go, all of the imperfections came to the fore. So the idiosyncrasies, the little things that our family members would do that would upset us, you know, we can't escape those anymore. And so I was reading a research last week in the United States by a Lucy Stewart Gold podcast, where they indicated that during the pandemic, divorce inquiries increased. Now, inquiries as in calling to find out, how do I get this done? How do I separate from my partner? Those inquiries increased by 122%. And what that is showing us is that, you know, the more you get stuck in that space and you start to see aspects of your partner that you could perhaps escape, because you escape it through work, right? And now you're working from home and you have to deal with that. So it does have its negatives, and it has its positive. And I think that we should take the best from the pandemic, you know, seeing how we can spend more time with our families, and certainly to team members and viewers, in terms of the deaths, the COVID-19 pandemic. I think that perhaps every other family can speak to the fact that they had somebody close in their family, you know, or otherwise, that they would have lost during this time. And that has been a very painful experience for all of us. So we take the very best of it, the enhanced family relationship, the simplifying our lives, and we take the worst of it, the understanding the imperfections that we all carry, you know, the idiosyncrasies that may affect each other, but recognizing the value that we bring to each other, and take that as a whole, because certainly we are not perfect human beings.
Well, let me stay with you a little, because even though, you know, the Prime Minister signaled a change with the repealing of the Disaster Risk Management Act, we still remain in a public health crisis. So given what we've gone through, what you've enunciated, what Christine shared with us, what should families do now to continue to keep safe and at the same time thrive in this new paradigm?
All right, so I would say that, well, in terms of keeping safe, we have to continue to maintain the proper sanitation protocols. We can't get around that at all. I think sanitization of hands is now, it's such a normal part of who we are, that if our hands are not sanitized, we kind of feel a little funny, because we're so used to it now. So, right. So that I don't think that is going anywhere you know, as we continue along this journey. We have to continue to engage in research as families and to keep informed. The virus keeps mutating. Things are happening in different parts of the world. How can we keep informed? And we have to continue to do our medical checks and be proactive as well in addressing the concerns, because the truth is, Miss Gray and Dr. Clarke and Miss Trisha Williams-Singh, a lot of us, we kind of abandon this whole notion of doing proper checks. Every year or every 6 months, we would only go when something arises and when it gets out of control. We are now in a space where we have to be so connected and ensure that we're going to the doctor, doing these checks routinely with our children, no matter how young they are. We know about the child health diseases, and some of us, based on where we are in age, we have to take more responsibility for our health as well. But in terms of thriving though, Miss Gray, I think we learned budgeting in a totally different way during this pandemic as parents, because we had the children and they had to eat more than if we had sent them out and give them some lunch money. So we have learned how to compress. We have to compress the budgetary expenses, how to manage in terms of the light in the house, the water, the different things that we would take for granted, how to raise our children to understand that if you're not using this, you turn it off. Because before, the attention perhaps was not so much there, but moving to and from work and getting things done. Just in terms of thriving, in terms of how we supervise our very own homes, the education of our children, that shifted. You know, parents took on a more of a supervisory role than ever before, because we all have our challenges. And some of us didn't even know how challenged we were with technology and virtual learning. And we had to play a bigger role in that. We couldn't leave it up to the teachers or the Ministry of Education alone to manage. And so a lot of us had to learn those things. And so we are now better able to deal with our children's education and to take responsibility for our children's learning, to manage them, to monitor them, to ensure that the homework is done that perhaps we were not so focused on because we were so dependent on the face-to-face learning with the teachers at school to get that done. And so we have opportunities to thrive, right? By being more connected to the growth and development of not only our children, but our own selves, our spouses, our mothers, fathers, siblings, and playing a more, what should I say, intimate role in that. And the changes in schedules and routines, though there may be negatives to it, I mean, we would have learned so much from it in terms of how we can navigate, how skillful and responsive we can be in times of crisis. So I think that as a nation, we should not let a good pandemic go to waste. This pandemic has taught us too much. We should not let it go to waste. Let us take all of the positives from it and see if we can continue to build a Jamaica on that kind of foundation.
Okay, thank you so much. Good points. So Trisha, let me open the door for an SME discussion. From your perspective, you know, what are the characteristics of those SMEs that have done well during this pandemic? What have you seen? Share your thoughts with us. Have we lost Trisha? Seems so. Well, we move right along. So Christine, I had another question for you, and it's kind of a segue from what you had said before. It speaks about looking at those lessons learned. So from your perspective, how can we institutionalize it? I think, you know, we listen to many commentaries by speakers, and they raise good points, but how do we institutionalize it? How do we document it for posterity, and how do we leverage it?
Well, I think it may be more form. I guess some of it, you know, we may go back to again, the issue of culture. For some businesses, I think, as I said, and especially in some industries, it probably, the changes are probably a done deal. In that, because of how quickly they've responded to change their systems, the learning has happened, maybe the hard way. You know, some companies may have seen their stock prices fall, or shareholders may have been very upset during 2020 and they had no other choice. And so that's already kind of hard coded into how they will operate going forward. I think for the individuals, and I certainly support the thoughts that were shared by Taneisha just now, a lot of the things that she has raised in terms of for the families who were actually able to take this time and were able, because of, you know, how we work and how our homes are structured, to do it. I think also, I mean, from my perspective, I valued that time and seeing the areas that my daughter didn't know as much as she could have, and the areas that she did. That enabled me to then put in place my own plan. You know, I felt more empowered to be a part of the process.
Yes.
Sometimes you get the impression, oh, mommy, just leave her, you know, just drop her off and go, you know. But then at the end of the day, you may not be happy with the results that you see on a report. You know, so again, it is going back to what I mentioned about the balancing and persons learning from this process, that we can empower ourselves, we can be empowered as parents, not to go to school and be divisive, be dismissive, or be disrespectful, but to find ways of continuing that connection, to say, how can I help? Maybe just listening to the principal's plans could be a world of a difference, being a sounding board. Even if you can't raise funds, you don't want to walk up and down with the lapathon paper every day, them a bit. Sometimes just listening, what is it you want to do? Where is this school? Where do you think the school should go? Have you considered A, B, or C? What if a few of us just did this or that? So it is not to say, oh, they're back to face-to-face. So, you know, the learning and the opportunities from COVID, we don't need them anymore. No, I think what this period, and especially in light of the fact that the challenges continue. Yes, COVID may be now endemic, but the challenges continue. The inflationary environment is soon going to start taking a hit on companies. There may be, you know, some of the COVID measures that they're given to staff. They may say, boy, we can't continue it anymore. You know, at the very crunch time when, no, we thought COVID was bad, but no, here are the prices going up from gas to everything else. And so I think engagement, and that is why I mentioned the employee engagement going in, and just engagement of parents with teachers. As I said, it's not about, you know, disrespecting or things. It's about finding how can we work with each other as stakeholders to leave something even when we have left. Just like Dr. Allen would have left this legacy, here we are in it now. What can we leave at the basic school, or the primary school, or the prep school, or the high school, or even UA or UCC, or you? What can we leave to say, okay, here is something, you know, it emanated out of COVID. The parents came, or the students came and gave these ideas, and it really came out of that crisis. Because the other part that I wanted to add to what Taneisha said is, the kids now who were online and with the struggle, and now they're face-to-face, they appreciate school far more than they probably would have had there been no COVID. They appreciate the opportunities to be in a classroom, to experience what it was, especially for those who were, you know, toddlers when COVID was onset. Now they're 4 or 5 and they're in a classroom and they're answering questions, and, you know, it feels different, and they know it is different from when they were online. And so I think it's about us saying, as parents, as individuals, as aunts, as guardians, saying, you know, sometimes you feel left out. Oh, the teacher have them now, so maybe, you know, we go back to the old ways of leaving it up. No, I'm saying we need to continue, find a different way to get involved and be involved. Is there a PTA? If not, can we have a support group? What, you know, engage with other parents. What can we do? How can we interact with the principal and the school and the community at large, and the church? I mean, lots of churches were played significant roles. How can we maybe transition the time we would have spent, you know, in the online school with our children towards being, because all of this is not siloed, you know, it helps us even when we go back to work. As I said, we have to make it routine now. Let's look at our processes. How do we do admissions? Or how do you do hiring? Does it have to be this way? I don't know. Maybe it does. But just the very fact of asking the question and looking at it and saying, but why are we taking so long to get back to persons? Why can't we, I don't know, maybe have an automatic cutoff where those over that get something and then we look at the marginal? I don't know. But just in doing that, I'm saying, just like we're doing at home, you know, the light bill, why is the light bill going up? Oh, we made a mistake, we didn't do this or something. It's something that we should try to apply right across, because in looking back at the processes, I think, and how we do what we do and why we don't bother fix that area, just leave that. And why are we doing that? Do we even need it then if we can't talk about it and discuss it? I think it would help us right across the board, because it's not a silo, you know. Yes.
All right. Trisha, you've been having connectivity challenges, but we're determined to have you participate by the hook or the crook. So I want to circle back to our question on the SMEs. What are the characteristics from your perspective of the SMEs that have done well throughout the pandemic, these past 2 years? We can see you. We're excited to hear you.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Apologies, and I still hope you can hear me. The characteristics that SMEs that have done well despite the COVID challenge include pursuing a mission. It's very clear that you're also focusing on your customers, employing a great management team that believes in the product. So whatever you're doing, if your team is not on board, passionate about it, being able to quickly, as I like to use the word that I'm sure I was tired of hearing, pivot, then, you know, having an innovative mindset. That's one of the things I try to share with everyone along this journey in the last, 2 years with this COVID. If you weren't innovative as an SME, if you weren't innovative as a business person, then definitely you find yourself with challenges. Adapting new technology, which is what is here, as we can see, beating me, the whole technology aspect, if you're not adapting to that. Fostering the right corporate culture. And people like to ask me, what do you mean by right corporate culture? A culture that is very much in line with your product. So if your product is based on the acronym LOVE, if you don't have that culture of love for every aspect of your business and your partners, then surely you'll find yourself with problems. You have to always be prepared to monitor, review, and evaluate the processes. You know, Dr. Clarke, you made a statement, which I kept on writing down, that we need to look at even any transition that we have, any crisis, any resilience that we talk about. It's continuous. It's a journey, not a destination. So even as we continue this process going forward, we have to always look at the fact that
we have to look at the fact that she's frozen. So
a lot. Challenging the status quo. Listen, do not create this silo where you know see this person as, oh my God, they're a troublemaker. Oh no, don't see that, because then what you are doing is actually shutting down sometimes that creativity that is required to help you to pivot in everything that you do. So again, it's always critical for us to recognize that SMEs, your best functioning is just keep close to your product, keep close to what you're doing. But remember, you tend to have, just like with me, a small workforce. You have to even keep that much closer. Like I said, do not isolate that one voice that challenges you the most. It's important for us to become results-based management and monitoring. You have to be results-oriented. It can't be that, and you know, take us back to when we were growing up as children. We'd hear this, right? You can't keep doing the same thing over and over and expect a different results. You can't. So that is critical to be resource-based management, monitoring of whatever you're doing. And I like to share from even my personal consultancy, this whole experience of COVID, I started Orchids. What had happened in our country in the last 2 years? A lot of what I would do in terms of brand management, marketing, positioning, hosting conference, being that mediator, guess what happened? We weren't having anymore. Literally, you watch globally, countries literally shut down. Jamaica as a dot in the grand scheme of things. We too had that shutdown. So we still have to survive, right? So as a business, I pivot, because guess what was happening, as we've all spoken about, persons enjoy being at home. It becomes your safe space. It becomes that space that you need to exist. What do you think was happening? Persons are looking at their garden and saying, oh no, the flowers is not blooming. Oh no, I want to do this. So a lot of us kept on saying, you know, we're tired of hearing the word, everybody's telling us to pivot. What does pivot really means? Well, TWS, we started to do orchids, and we were going into homes now and fixing up their gardens, of course, respecting all the protocols that exist. But the point I'm making, I never saw myself doing gardens as an income. And thank God for my trusted partners as it pertains to which I always say to everybody, your financial partner is very important. They have to appreciate your needs. They have to be also aligned. So now you're moving where.
Well, let's give her a minute. But just get yourself ready, Taneisha, because you're next in the hot seat if she remains frozen for more than a second.
Oh, I'm done. Okay, bye.
No, we have to seize you while we have you, because your connectivity challenges are out of this world.
Sorry.
So let's ride that wave. If you were to teach a class, what would be those lessons that the sector can learn from successful SMEs? One certainly you shared is, you know, being able to pivot. But what else? What else could we learn as potential SMEs, as existing SMEs?
As existing, we need to also have the power of gratitude and quality over quantity. SMEs need to recognize that. You need quality over quantity. That's very important for us to always look at.
Okay. All right. So I'll migrate over to you now, Taneisha. And it remains pretty much in that vein. What kind of adjustments, if you were to keep a class and you were asked, what kind of adjustments would families have to make in order to survive another pandemic? What would you share with the class?
Well, all right. Thanks again, Ms. Grey, and excellent insights, Mrs. Trisha Williams-Singh. I would first want to just put this to all the viewers here, that what the pandemic allowed us all to do was to step down that ladder of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? We reverted, we came all the way down to the very bottom, which was safety, security, health.
Very
you know, that's what we did. So the whole idea of self-esteem and self-actualization, all those were secondary. Mm-hmm. And so what the pandemic taught us was that we're simply humans. No matter how decorated we are, no matter how successful we are or otherwise, we're simply humans. And so in terms of adjustments that we need to make is recognizing the human in us first. Be kind. That is something that we have to hold dear to. Be kind. We saw that we had to, even in terms of burying our family members. We had to do this in closed spaces. Some of us couldn't even put them in churches. Where people could not be at the funeral because of the constraints, the protocols in terms of numbers. And so we recognize that we just have to be kind to each other. So in our family spaces, in our work spaces, you know, whilst we gather, Dr. Clarke, all of the data that we need to change in terms of how we operate, be kind. Look at the individual first in terms of the decisions that we are supposed to be making. People have families. We recognize that now more than ever. We have a child to send to school. And so whilst you are working from home as the leader, can I get some flexibility too? Because the same way that you have to navigate this, I have to be doing that. We also have to recognize too that roles in terms of adjustments can no longer be defined. You know, and so we saw that in the workspaces, that the fact that you are a particular staff member given a particular set of responsibilities, the COVID-19 pandemic is asking you to step out of that a great deal. That the skills and competencies that you once had, you're going to have to build on those. That we're going to have to learn to staff weaknesses, you know, and value the strengths in each other. And so roles and responsibilities, even in the home, can no longer be defined. Things that mother used to do, father now has to do, and things that children never used to do, they now have to do, right? And the last thing I will say is that just in terms of the way we manage our two things, actually, the way we manage our finances.
Yes.
I mean, that hit home more than ever. Was I really budgeting? Was I really saving? We were pulled in a situation where people lost their jobs. And the fact that you lost your job meant that you couldn't feed your family even for a week. That happened in many households. And so we have to reimagine the way we manage our finances. Can I manage my finances in such a way that if I should lose my job without any fault of my own, my family can be fed? Those were serious things that confronted Jamaicans. Not being able to go out to work, could not feed the family. So we have to rethink the way we manage our homes. And some of the homes, there was frustration. And so we now have to adjust, Dr. Clarke, because we did not spend the time to make our homes beautiful. You know, I heard Mrs. Trisha Williams-Singh say that she went into orchids, you know, during the pandemic. We were moving so quickly from home to work that we didn't spend time in investing in the physical space to make it livable, as in a space that I can actually stay in for an entire week. A lot of families did not do that investment. And so the homes were miserable. You know, the homes were sparse in terms of comfort areas. And we found that we had to be putting in all those structures so that we could tolerate even the very home space that we had. You know, and so some of the adjustments that we can make as families, make your home beautiful, invest in that, those four walls. It doesn't matter how small the space is, how large the space is, make it beautiful because it is what you have. You couldn't go to work. That had to be your sanctuary, right? Yes. Recognize that roles are no longer defined, right? And see how best we can be very serious about managing our finances, however small, however little bit of money that we are getting. How can we manage it so that we can provide for our families in times of crises?
Thank you so much.
That's my
very profound, very profound. And Christine, I'm just going to pounce on you because you were nodding in total agreement with you are nodding in total agreement with Taneisha. So from the global perspective that you gave at the start, how can we identify the changes that you think would be beneficial to society? I think we're at the point with this pandemic where we have to start putting our finger on things. So how can we identify the changes?
So the beneficial, you know, whether something is beneficial or not, of course, ultimately for the individual, the consumer, and even from, you know, our vision statement from Vision 2030, it's about that quality of life. You know, as in, how can we choose that? Yes, I want to go home, you know, because it's beautified, or we're more tolerant of each other. You know, maybe the parents don't want to just stay out on Friday nights. They will come for the game night, etc. One of the things that I said the word reprioritization, but maybe never communicated all that that entails. One of the things we learned certainly during the pandemic is we have to move some of the goalposts that we may have set up, or that our employer or husband or child would wish us to adhere to. In other words, we had so much coming at us. There were so many imperatives, if I may be allowed to. For example, at UE, we just shut down for a month. Let's just take some time to figure out what we will do, you know, when we reopen to close out the semester and head into the summer. Sometimes you have to move the goalposts and say, okay, these are the 100 things we need done, you know, to get the house ready or to do whatever it is. Which ones must be done immediately? And that is what I meant by the reprioritization. I think, as Taneisha had said, many parents are realizing that, you know, yes, we were earning a little bit, but now we're not earning anything. What did we do with that little bit? How are we now surviving without all the, and even the ones that earned perhaps more, without all of those, for want of a better word, fandangos? What were we doing with our resources? That means, you know, we could have saved for you to go to UE or UCC or whatever it is. You could have been doing whatever activities you wanted. Let us say gymnastics. We thought it was too expensive, but look, you're not doing all of these other things. And when we look at them, we could have actually afforded it. So the human capital development, of course, you know, it starts in the home. Parents are the first teachers of their children in whatever way, whether positive or negative. So that introspection there at the individual level, government, I'm sure, is saying the same thing. You know, we had so many quote unquote fat years. What were we doing and how can we not make those mistakes again? Because as I've indicated, right now it's not just about COVID-19. And, you know, if you are watching the international news, and several of my friends from grad school who are Chinese are bawling bitterly over what's happening in Shanghai, and probably other, well, they're trying to contain it, but of course, you know how magnificent and wide ranging that country is, so that we don't have, you know, another set of 2 years or 3 years, depending on how it mutates. So these things, you know, that we're trying to pin down, what I want to ensure that people realize is the individual things feed over into the business. The people you have to manage, you know, they are coming from a home where, again, depending on how they're able to navigate, they may or may not be ready to work when they log in or when they turn up. And so, again, you go back to the people managers, the talent managers, the task designers, and, you know, how do you compose or create the work in such a way that persons can navigate it without feeling demoralized? That's one of the things we learned, you know, when, you know, people are at home, how much a job means to some person's ego, to their self-worth, to their, you know, being able to contribute, to go to an environment where they're consulted on, no matter how low they're in. You know, how should we set up this room for this meeting with the president, or with the, how should we do this? Do you have enough coffee to offer? You started to see that with the closure, and, you know, okay, we don't need you this week. Persons now are without that kind of, you know, sense of worth and self-worth that then, of course, can spill over negatively in the home. And the same thing in government, high levels of frustration with just not being able to get things done. We need this, but because of the closures, you can't. So we see how important work is. Yeah. And some persons may have started to question, was I really even in a job? I didn't realize I didn't have these benefits. I didn't realize these things didn't apply to me. So when I went to NIS or wherever, I couldn't collect anything. What can I do to get a job that is permanent or tenured or whatever the language might be at that particular entity? And so again, going back to the talent managers, and how are you going to navigate, you know, how do you navigate that space in a way that persons don't feel used or abused by the entity on either side, but that there are opportunities, there are ways, you know, you're encouraged to to save or to invest or whatever it is to be able to provide for your family, because there will be another crisis. We know this. We're in maybe the initial throes of another crisis. So how can we build up those stores, you know, individually or at whatever scale they are, so that we can better navigate the crisis? And that is where my comments about the green spaces, you know, I don't know if this is a business venture or kind of foundational thing. If we find ourselves in another crisis where, because we have a lot of urban areas where persons don't necessarily have space to walk and space to see the mountains or look at, I don't know, the ocean front, how can we create spaces that even if we had, you know, in-person limits, persons could still feel, oh, but I have a park I can go to, maybe the community can schedule, okay, this avenue goes on this time, I don't know, so that persons can see that, okay, life is still happening. We can still, you know, birds are still flying. There's still things happening. The universe is still happening. And you'd be surprised, just looking out at it opens the mind space, right? Rather than being in a closed room where you can't see beyond your current issues and problems.
Yes.
So I think it's an evolution. As I say, it's not an event. We have not rebounded. We will continue to rebound, but even in doing so, we have to ensure that we understand it is likely to be multiple crises coming after this. And again, how can we empower people that they can prepare for themselves? One of the things we found when the care package was designed and developed, you know, persons say, so, I mean, clearly it was beneficial and I'm not taking away from that, but some of the persons who perhaps the government really wanted to reach out, they don't have a birth certificate, don't have a TRN, and then they think to go and join all of those different lines to get that, to get $10,000. So you end up with a lot of apathy in the system. And then again, when the government goes to speak, again, you interact with the trust deficit that we have. So we have to think about a lot of these things and the self-worth and how people see themselves, and how that is tied up in their job and their family and their ability to provide, you know, there are complex issues, there are softer issues. It's not as easy as saying, oh, we need to reduce our debts or we need to, you know, retile the banking hall. These are more, you know, nuanced issues, and it requires time, as Taneisha said. Are you listening? Are you hearing what the person is saying? Not watching what they're doing, you know, the mischief or the other things, but what's really happening? Where are they suited best? Are they misfitted in the organization? You know, how do we help them to achieve what Vision 2030 is trying to do, which is your fullest potential? You don't have to go anywhere. You don't have to deviate. It will be the place of choice basically here to do everything, live, work, raise families, and do business.
All right, Taneisha, let's come to you. You gave quite a spirited discussion around families and how families cope. So if you were asked to give a blueprint, what would 4 key strategies be for families to employ to not just survive COVID, but survive a pandemic? Because, you know, Christine mentioned it, we might be going into a pandemic of a different kind very shortly. So what would be those strategies for the families to employ?
Okay, all right. Thanks again. And again, Dr. Clarke, quite insightful. The first thing I would say is family members need to engage. We need to engage, and we have to do that at a different level. Not engage only in terms of, you know, our regular family visits that we would do, but engage around deep issues in terms of care for the home, deeper issues in terms of educating our children, deeper issues in terms of our own mental health, right? Which as a matter of fact became so exposed during the pandemic. I don't know if the language, you know, that we speak around mental health was even very evident before the COVID-19 pandemic. This is the time that we're speaking about it more than ever before. It is now infusing even in our curriculum, you know, in the university, mental health webinars and seminars, because these are some of the things that we just did not focus on. So engage as best as possible if you're going to be dealing with another crisis, you're going to need that bond in the home and that bond in the heart, recognizing the imperfections and being kind to each other. So that's one. The second one I would speak to, I alluded to before, is being very, very purposeful, very deliberate as it concerns our finances, right? I think that, and I'm going to speak broadly, it's a broad approach, that as a people, you know, we take it too lightly how we manage our finances. However small, as we said before, those monies are, whether it's a fortnightly paid or millions of dollars that we collect, we recognize that when we are faced with a crisis, if we were not managing financially, we're left to the mercy in so many cases of the world. Yeah. So how can we include our children in the home in terms of managing financially? I'm going to tell you one of the things that I did quickly with my daughter in terms of the light. So I gave her a task of bringing down the light bill. This was her responsibility, to bring it down every month to a lower amount. And with every dollar that she saved, she would get 50 cents. Right? Now she started to add up those 50 cents because she now saw that as collecting so that she can do what she wants to do with the money. And so she would walk around and turn off every light. Sometimes I come home and I'm saying, but Jesus, the house in darkness. But then I remember that she had a task to do. And even though it was small, it was important to her because she would be looking forward. Mommy, what's the light bill this month? This is what it was last month. I mean, under normal circumstances, you don't share light bill with your children. They don't see it. They don't see what the bill looks like. They don't see the water bill. They don't see the grocery bill. But they have to start seeing that so that their financial independence can now be developed. So that if another crisis should come in play, they can support in the home in terms of their attitudinal responses. And as they grow up as adults, they too become more responsible, right? And so that would be number two. Number three would be our medical or health, right? And here, not just our physical health, but also what we are feeding our minds, right? In times of crisis or otherwise. I know many people, Dr. Clarke, who got a degree out of the pandemic, as in they use that free time to study, to do an online course, to register in a university, to enroll. And so they can show something from the pandemic. How many of us have anything to show from the pandemic? As in, what did we gain from it? So we have to be deliberate in terms of our mental capacity, our mental health, and our physical health. And the last one I would say is to be respectful of every single protocol that this government put before us. You know, as a country, we have to learn to be disciplined, have manners, respect. You hear that you're supposed to wear your mask, you wear your mask. You hear that there's a curfew, you adhere to the curfew. You know, those are the things I think we were forced. And we shouldn't have been, Dr. Clarke and team members and Mrs. Singh and Ms. Grey and other viewers. We shouldn't have been. Jamaica was literally forced to be disciplined, forced to obey. We had to be putting police on the road, putting people in truck back and all kind of something for disobeying orders. So we recognize how indisciplined we have been as a society. And if we are going to survive another pandemic, this indisciplined business cannot work, you know? And so a lot has been learned. And as I said before, this was an excellent opportunity for us to learn as a nation, family, business, and otherwise. And we should not let this proper good pandemic go to waste. Just put all the things that we have learned in action.
Okay, well, ladies and gentlemen, we're now in the Q&A section. So please share your questions so that we can raise them. And Taneisha, there actually is one, and it's posed to you. It's from Sandra Bloomfield, and it says, being mindful of parents who could not lock down and could not stay home because they exist from hand to mouth and had to leave young children to the elements to hustle. These families were impacted in unimaginable ways and continue to suffer differently. How do we reach out to children from these families who are now in physical school with the pains from the pandemic experiences? Good question, Sandra.
Yes, it is an excellent question. And I'm happy. I think that question will be better posed for our Miss Trisha, given that she is in that early childhood. She has those responsibilities for early childhood education. But I honestly believe that the schools have done well, you know, in terms of identifying our children who are underserved, you know, in the community. Teachers, in many cases, educators would have reached out. The data that comes into the school also in terms of, you know, the child's access, I think from that whole platform, the work that the Ministry of Education did in terms of access to the internet created a kind of way for us to see into the homes of a lot of these families and recognize that even some of them were in rural spaces, they didn't have some of the basic amenities, and not just Wi-Fi, but basic amenities to survive. And so that gave the schools a lot of data. And I know that the Ministry of Education has been active in responding to those needs of the children in terms of the socioeconomic challenges. And so, as I said before, you know, we came down from that high horse, self-esteem, self-actualization, all the way down to safety and security and home and health and eating. And sectors would have done a lot. The care packages that Dr. Clarke spoke about a while ago, you know, that was as a result of us getting a very clear idea of what was taking place in homes and with our children for them to be supported. And so quite a number of sectors would have stepped up, you know, to respond to these things. And we have to just keep at it. So I would encourage the Ministry of Education to keep on top of this data, you know, to monitor what's taking place in the homes, not just for internet connectivity, but for basic food, because a child is so difficult to learn without food, right? And even where they sleep, you know, those things are so important, and they become so obvious. They became, so obvious during this time. And I'm sure, you know, the early childhood sector would have done a lot, but Ms. Singh would be better placed to speak about a lot of these things than I would be. So that would be my response to the question.
Okay, I noticed that she's not back. She seems to have dropped again. But Christine, I saw you trying to weigh in. So share your thoughts.
Sure. You know, this is, of course, the area that I think I started alluding to, but I would have spoken mostly to the aging, but certainly the care economy is going to become maybe where the money is in another, in the next decade, because as you indicate, there are going to be so many persons who would have, as you're indicating, Ms. Bloomfield, suffered from the fallout of just how some parents, you know, economic structure is, some households are, and maybe the jobs, maybe both parents were required workers, they couldn't work from home, they had to, you know, go out. And so children were either left unsupervised or with persons who may not have necessarily treated them in the way we would have wished. And so the impacts can, you know, end up being very long-lived, and this is going to be significant. And so the care economy, you know, your social workers, one of the strategies that I think has been, you know, it's been on and off pushed is to try to get persons to re-engage with a church, not necessarily saying you necessarily have to be a member, but to engage with that community as an option for support, where and how you see fit. But certainly the social work dimensions of the care economy are going to come under basically a lot of strain. And as it has been indicated, I mean, it makes sense for a lot of it to be addressed through the school, just because that's where the children now are. Hopefully they're back face to face. But what we can clearly see is that we will have a social fallout. And this was one of the things that I had mentioned in terms of the fact that, you know, being at home has unfortunately given, you know, the opportunity for the negative dimensions of our societal influences, or just even possibly neglect, not deliberate neglect, but I'm not sure I don't want to say the wrong thing because this is not my area, but just, you know, how do you help children to understand? And part of it, I think, as Taneisha had been saying, you know, usually your children wouldn't have very much of an understanding of the light bill, etc. But to sit with the children and explain, look, this is a reality. If I don't go, then you won't be able to, you know, enjoy all the benefits that you now have. This is just how my job is. It's not about me not loving you. It's not about me not wanting to stay when, you know, Tom's parents can stay or Jane's parents can stay, but this is just the reality it is. And this is why I'm trying to help you to get the education you need so that you would have, maybe it is a matter of motivating them from the perspective of having more options when in their time, helping them to, you know, learn a broader curriculum as they're trying to do PEP so that you can transition. I think many of us, we may be in the tail end of the scenario where you have a job for life or a job with tenure or a job. A lot of these benefits, we're going to see them transition out of the workplace, except for some small nodes. And so the ability to basically have transferable skills is what is going to be in high demand. Yes, we're not, it's not about being a teller versus being a wealth manager. It's about what are the skills you have and where can you apply them now based on where there are openings and opportunities to create value. So a lot of this, I think, is going to have to maybe start with the parents engaging these children to help them to understand, because I find that once you engage them, just like with anybody else, why are we washing the car this way? Why do we do this? Why are we not tearing down everybody's plants? Then persons can understand and identify, do you think, would you be happy if this was done to you in that way? No, then try not to do it. So when you engage the children to explain to them why it is you have been going out every day, but their friends are saying this and that, they can understand and appreciate, and you can mitigate some of these kind of negative feelings that they may have. And again, you have to engage with the teachers and the other support staff. You know, not because they're going face to face, it doesn't mean, as I said before, you'll get the results you thought, right? It's not, the teacher will not necessarily be able to do everything, because chances are, as bad as you may think your situation is, in the school environment, there are probably multiple with a worse scenario. And so even though you thought, oh, teacher could have, yeah, but you had maybe 6 or 7 who were, you know, just hanging on by maybe a thread because of her or something that the school is offering, and she had to carry them to the line and across the line. So again, it's about taking the responsibility, but children understand a lot more. And if we engage them and explain and help them to find ways to cope, trade off the different options, help them to choose. Does it make sense? Or you just want to do this? Help them, empower them when they have the reasoning capacity on their own, or that you've helped them to develop, then it's easier for them to problem solve even in the classroom. Okay, somebody took your crayon, no problem, let them have it. It's not gonna break us. It's not gonna, don't get into a fight. So the way how we speak to them and organize their life and help them to think about it. Does it matter really in the whole scheme of things if somebody takes your crayons? Maybe not. They're not necessarily gonna become a billionaire. They now start to think, weigh the options. What do I prefer? Can I understand why this is happening? And you end up having someone whose brain is developing to contend with, again, another crisis, another fallout. They say, oh, Mom, you remember in COVID, we thought it was bad. Look at this now, you know, and they can push back. So I am concerned about these families, but certainly there's not a silver bullet, because again, as I had said, these are soft issues, right? It's not just, oh, buy you some uniform. Okay, I can sponsor you the shoe, and then we all move along, you know, and you're back at school. This is a continuous engagement, and that's why I think it has to be led by or driven by the parents and what they would wish, how they wish to be engaged. The government can go in, but not accomplish much if, again, the parents are not willing to engage in that process.
All right. So we have not had many other questions from the panel, so the attendees. So I think it's a good way for us to wrap up. What I have heard from all three panel members is, a good crisis must not be wasted. I have heard from Trisha, who, I apologize, team, she's having no ends of technology challenges, but certainly some takeaways from her was, being able to spot that moment when you need to pivot and understanding just what business is about. How do you find that way to serve the needs of the customer? It may not be what you're doing exactly now, but it's something that you have realized the customer needs, and you have the setup to facilitate it, move quickly to seize the opportunity. So that would be Trisha's closing statement. So I'm going to give each of you an opportunity to share some closing remarks with the lecture attendees. What's most burning on your mind in your subject areas as you have spoken? So Christine, would you like to start, or Taneisha, would you like to go ahead?
I can start
Sure.
since I'm on. As I close, I think I would want to emphasize that resilience, building resilience to crises, is something that all countries, but particularly countries like the one we live in, a small island developing state, have to contend with. We can't just, lay down and die. So in doing that, every single person in the society, every grouping in the society has to play a role. There's no one entity that can do it all or has all the solution and all the resources to implement. At the individual level, there's a lot of things that need to be done, as well as at the collective level. But if we start and understand that COVID has given us an opportunity, as was said, to reset, to rethink, to question. Don't be offended now when person says, why do we have to do it this way? Yeah, why? How? Start looking at your processes, what you're doing. Do you really need it? Many persons start to say, I used to do this every week. Why? Why did I have to go to this place or do this somewhere, or why? You start to say, I didn't really need it. I did without it for a year. It's no longer in your psyche. So questioning, looking back at how we operate, why we do the things we do. And then, as I said, from the lecture, management as a technology now has to play a different role. When persons now question is not to say, oh, you're, as was said, you're a troublemaker, you just don't want to follow the rules. No, hear it from a different lens. Why are we really doing this? Can we accomplish the same thing with 1/10 of the effort? And therefore that remaining 9/10 can be used to do other things that add value to the stakeholders. That's what I'd wish to leave. And this is broad, because at the family level, your stakeholders, clearly your family members. How do you add value? How do you help the elderly who can't come out, but still keep them safe, and interacting with everybody? That it's broadly applicable right across.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Clarke. Dr. Ingleton, your closing comments.
I have absolutely no challenge endorsing and agreeing with everything that Dr. Clarke has said, because she has said it so clearly. The only thing I would add, and it is already said, just recognizing that we are humans, recognizing that we are at first people. We're not machines. We cannot be replaced the way you can replace a printer, a car, a building. Leaders have to recognize that their employees are at first humans, that the very needs, the very challenges, the very circumstances that they are facing, the employees are facing that. Parents recognizing that our children are at first humans, that they're feeling that they're experiencing this the emotional state that they're in based on this pandemic is no different from what we're experiencing. There's no high-low. It's no longer a parent-child relationship in the workplace or even at the home level. Coming to the table and understanding first the humanness of this population will solve a lot of our problems if we take that first. The decisions we make will change. The way we talk about people will change. The policies that we put in place will definitely change once we understand that we're dealing with humans. So that's my piece.
Right, ladies. Yes, I agree. We should give her a little clap. All right. I want to thank you both for your spirited contributions. Your comments were well researched, informative, and certainly put a twist on things. If we thought the family was, underrated, you've certainly given it energy, Taneisha. And Dr. Clarke, I mean, we have the whole globe, the world looking at from your comments. So I want to thank you very much for participating. It has been my pleasure to have been a part of it. And I hand back over now to Gary, our conference chairperson. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, ladies. Thank you very much. That was indeed an exciting interactive panel. There's just so much to take away, but listen, my main takeaway from that panel is let's not waste a good pandemic. Let's focus on managing our finances. A lot was said, and it was indeed a very, very good interactive panel. At this point, in our program, we will look at the Rickert Allen Scholarship Experience. This, we will speak to last year's recipient, but before we do, we are going to be having a presentation by Mrs. Thalia Lynn from the NCB Foundation. She is the CEO of a popular indigenous chain of quick service restaurants. You might know it as Island Grill. She has exceptional business acumen that has placed her on many boards, including the largest of Jamaica's bank, NCB Financial Group, where she's currently the chair of the NCB Foundation. Mrs. Lynn sits on the Corporate Governance Committee and serves as on the Board of Trustees from NCB's pension fund. Mrs. Lynn is an inspirational leader with years of experience across many industries, including teaching, investing, and diplomacy. Without further ado, we will hear from Mrs. Thalia Lynn.
Professor Dennis Gale, President, University of the Commonwealth Caribbean, UCC. Dr. Yvonne Dawkins, Associate Vice President for Academic Affairs of UCC. Sandra Grey, Assistant General Manager, Group Human Resources and Facilities Division, NCB. Panelists including Dr. Taneisha Ingleton, Vice President of Administration at the Caribbean Maritime University, Dr. Christine Clarke, Senior Lecturer at the University of the West Indies, Mona, Trisha Williams-Singh, Founding Director of TWS Consultancy, the wider UCC and NCB families. Good afternoon. American civil rights and children's rights activist Marian Wright Edelman once shared, "Education is for improving the lives of others and leaving your community and world better than you found it." I believe her words capture perfectly the memory of the life and work of the late Dr. Rickert Allen. For that reason, his utilization of education as a tool for nation building will be kept alive through the Rickert Allen Memorial Lecture and Scholarship. Dr. Rickert Allen not only encouraged our youth and young professionals to adopt an agile philosophy for success, but ensured they were provided with customized digital training through the establishment of the UWI NCB Digital Talent Lab. A passionate advocate for technological development, Digitization and data application were central to his approach to organizational change. Joining NCB in 2002, the late Dr. Allen made stellar contributions throughout his 18-year tenure, which galvanized his rise to the role of Senior General Manager of the Group Human Resources and Facilities Division. He exemplified a pioneering approach to the re-imaging and restructuring of his division while successfully fostering team cohesion and commitment. Dr. Allen's passion building youth and communities through education and digital innovation has also influenced the focus of the NCB Foundation, which I chair. Consequently, we want to ensure his memory lives on in the hearts and minds of the people he treasured the most, the youth of our nation. That's why we're here today at the second staging of the Rickert Allen Memorial Lecture and Scholarship. The Rickert Allen Scholarship, available to eligible members of the UCC, the NCB Foundation supports digital transformation through digital media education, coding, robotics, animation, gaming boot camps, among other projects. Our digital focus is complemented by our life skills agenda, which offers training in financial literacy, communication, problem solving, and conflict resolution. Developing the communities that we serve is at the heart of what we do at NCB Foundation. The Rickert Allen Scholarship signals a shared philosophy between a beloved departed colleague and a company on which he has left an indelible mark. In addition to honoring our late colleague, this scholarship helps us to continue delivering on our promise to empower people, build communities, and unlock dreams everywhere we operate. We are therefore delighted to be presenting this check in support of the Dr. Rickert Allen Scholarship today. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Thalia Lynn. Interesting that NCB Foundation is doing such a great work in our community. And now we will hear from the first recipient of the Dr. Rickert Allen Scholarship. Ms. Nadian White is a first-year UCC student pursuing a Bachelor's of Science in Networking and Cybersecurity. Her motto is, be yourself, because everyone else is taken. And she's considering a career path in networking and computer system administration. We will now hear from the recipient, the first recipient of the Rickert Allen Scholarship, Ms. Nadian White.
My name is Nadian White, and I am the first Dr. Rickert Allen Scholar. It is an absolute honor to be a part of the NCB Foundation. Ever since I've been selected, I must say that I feel so much closer towards one of my dreams, and that dream is to complete my tertiary education. I am the youngest of 7 siblings and the first to pursue a tertiary education. That in itself was a motivation to complete university. I've always wanted to make a difference in my family, so this opportunity is a huge deal for me. I see it as a way of breaking past generational trends and setting a new standard. The NCB Foundation has been very beneficial. Not only did they make it possible for me to start university, but they've also provided me with the necessary educational supplies, such as a laptop to assist me in my studies. With this, I can do my assessments and submit them with a more updated device compared to the one I had before. For those who are hesitant when it comes to applying for a scholarship, I just want to encourage you to make use of the opportunities that come your way. Like myself, you might just wake up one day to an email saying that you were successful in the interview process, and just like that, you have a head start. Nothing beats trying. I started university with only a hope and a dream. Today, the NCB Foundation has made that a reality, and for that, I am truly grateful. Once again, thank you, NCB Foundation.
Thank you very much, Nadian White. And we are so proud of you. We know, we're convinced, we are certain that you will make the best of the opportunity afforded to you by this scholarship. We'll now go over to a symbolic check handover. And to receive the check is Associate Vice President of Academic and Student Affairs here at UCC, Dr. Yvonne Dawkins. Dr. Dawkins is receiving the check from Mrs. Thalia Lynn from the NCB Foundation. There you go. Thank you very much. The NCB Foundation is continuing to do a great work in the community in which we serve. As we pull to an end of this, the second Rickert Allen Memorial Scholarship, I would just like to say a few words. As we celebrate the man, as we celebrate his legacy, let us also not waste the opportunities that have been afforded to us by the COVID pandemic that has allowed us to refocus. Let us build our own legacies as we move forward, as we look forward to new opportunities that might be afforded us in this new dispensation. I now invite to give the closing remarks, Mrs. Sonia Davidson, she is the head of School of Business Administration Department here at UCC. With over 5 years, she's been lecturing for over 5 years in the business courses. She's an experienced business trained with over 25 years experience in corporate settings and brand communication. Thank you very much. It has been a pleasure serving you today. And as we go, while Mrs. Davidson makes her way here, I'd just like to share with you a few tokens that we'll be sharing with our participants of today's conference. Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you, Gary. Good afternoon, everyone. Protocols being observed. I sincerely hope that wherever in the land of peace our beloved Dr. Rickert Allen is today, that he's smiling and proud of our efforts. The late Dr. Rickert Allen was the former chair of the University of the Commonwealth Caribbean's Board of Directors from 2017 to 2019 and general manager of Group Human Resources and Facilities at the NCB Group. This second annual Rickert Allen Memorial Lecture under the theme, Becoming COVID-19 Resilient, represents a joint commitment to honor and keep in our thoughts a man who was a visionary and pioneer, who believed in re-imaging and restructuring for added value and satisfaction to stakeholders. The theme of this memorial lecture is therefore very apt, as certainly going forward, resilience will be paramount in how we manage and come out of this pandemic on the other side. With this in view, our heartfelt thanks goes to Professor Dennis J. Gale, University President of UCC, Mr. Patrick Hilton, President and CEO of the NCB Group, and Mrs. Thalia Lynn, Board Chair of the NCB Foundation, for their buy-in and approval of this event and scholarship awards. to perpetuate the memory of Dr. Rickert Allen. We especially thank Mr. Houghton Cummings, the current General Manager of Group Human Resources and Facilities at the NCB Group, for delivering the remarks today on behalf of NCB. To our interactive panel, Dr. Christine Clarke, Senior Lecturer at the University of the West Indies, UWI. Mrs. Trisha Williams-Singh, Founding Director of TWS Consultancy. Dr. Taneisha Ingleton, Vice President of Administration at CMU, who presented under the moderation of Mrs. Sandra Grey, Assistant General Manager of NCB. We take note of your presentation content and the thought-provoking issues we will all need to take into consideration as we seek to rebound from COVID-19 through the perspectives of business and family. The scholarship experience, as expounded by the first recipient, Ms. Nadian White, UCC student who is pursuing a bachelor's degree in information technology and going to specialize in networking and cybersecurity. Your presentation brings joy to our hearts. More joy came with a generous donation of $600,000 by the NCB Foundation to the Dr. Rickert Allen Memorial Scholarship Fund. We thank Mrs. Thalia Lynn for taking the time to make that presentation, which was accepted by our own Dr. Yvonne Dawkins, Associate Vice President of Student and Academic Affairs at UCC. This event could not have been possible without a lot of worker bees here today and in the background. Too many to name at this time. But Mrs. Julia Wong Brooks, Executive Assistant to the General Manager of Finance of NCB, thank you for today's invocation and starting things off. Thanks also goes to the Joint Organizing Committee of UCC and NCB team members, a beautiful synergy that resulted in the event today. To the marketing and IT teams of both institutions, thank you so much. We know it's not easy to pull together a virtual or hybrid event. The various administrators working in the background today, thank you so much. Those feeding in the Q&A and so on, we thank you for your efforts today. To all attendees, present and virtual, our heartfelt appreciation to you all for joining in today. Of course, as you heard before, we have some lovely tokens that our participants will get today. Ladies and gentlemen, put your thoughts together on how we will be resilient in rebounding and transitioning out of this COVID-19 pandemic. Thank you again and stay safe.
The Dr. Rickert Allen Scholarship, a guide to accelerate your career dreams. Meet Nadian White, a 23-year-old Westmoreland native pursuing a Bachelor of Science degree in networking with cybersecurity at the University of the Commonwealth Caribbean, UCC, whose career ambition is to become a network and computer system administrator or FIRST scholarship recipient. Let us look at the requirements of the Dr. Rickert Allen Scholarship. The scholarship requirements include: you must be a Jamaican citizen, be accepted as a first-year undergraduate student between the ages of 18 to 24 years to the University of the Commonwealth Caribbean in the program of study Bachelor of Science in Innovation and Entrepreneurship or Bachelor of Science in Networking with Cybersecurity. Additional requirements include: have demonstrated financial need, such as your household income, show history of community spirit, such as membership in an established youth club, involvement in service club and volunteer community service or school involvement. How to apply. All applications must be completed on the NCB website, www.ncb.com. The application period begins April 20th, and the window opens for approximately 6 weeks after. Once you're on the scholarships page, you must sign in with your Google account, or you can create your account on the website portal. Here are some tips to make your application successful. You must gather all your necessary documents before starting your application. This application is 100% online. Therefore, please ensure that you have good internet connectivity and a functional device. Be honest with your responses, as you'll be required to provide proof to validate your application. You can edit your application by logging into your account and going to A. My Submitted Applications, B. Select Unsubmit Application beside the application you wish to edit, C. To re-edit, go to the Apply Now tab and select the scholarship and grant of choice, D. To do your requisite edits for final submission, and E. You can make multiple edits. However, your final edit must be made by the application deadline. If you're experiencing any difficulties or have any questions in completing your application, feel free to submit your queries via the floating help desk icon at the bottom of the page. Apply today. The Department of Student Affairs continues to support our students in their quest to seek financial aid to achieve their academic goals. All the best and accelerate towards your dream with the Dr. Rickert Allen Scholarship.